Things are about to get a whole level of crazy. This is my 1,000-gallon cloud rainforest vivarium called Pandora, attached to a tree vivarium called Orchidia and a tropical wetlands vivarium called Hydromeda. They're home to a biodiverse array of plants, fungi, and of course, animals galore, from invertebrates to fish to amphibians, reptiles, and even mammals. A rainforest ecosystem within glass. But I've been waiting for this grand day to come. The day when a new type of animal joins our ever-growing rainforest within glass. It's time for Pandora to welcome our new griffins. The age of aves has begun. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon. Welcome to the AC fam. Enjoy. A plague had hit the rainforest this week. After months of a scorching hot and dry summer, the new rainy season in the forest had brought heavy rainfall and cooler temperatures over the past 3 weeks. And with it, an explosion of life. Where I live in Southeast Asia, many creatures were waking up now that it was the rainy season, after a summer-long sleep, to wait out the heat. Life in our forest has begun to ramp up again. But the first to take full advantage of the favorable conditions have been these prey insects. The crickets. A new generation of baby crickets had emerged from the soils, but this generation was much more plentiful than previous ones. There Snap, the resident sunskink, taking full advantage of the daily feast. But even she can't keep up with all these Cancerian seasonal crickets. Not even the nomads, the super colony of nomads that dominate the soils, could keep up with the abundance. There's a land planarian, a predatory flatworm, yuck, totally foregoing the potential prey all around it. I actually find this cricket plague staggering, as this didn't quite happen last year. If this massive cricket generation is allowed to grow up, we may have some problems on our hands. But last week, the Wheel of Gaia came right on time with the perfect solution. Our rainforest was about to undergo a major transformation with the coming of 2 dinosaurs. The birds hopped eagerly out of my hands onto the Pandoran forest floor. Both birds stood there, stunned, as they took in the new forest world around them. They stood completely still as they scanned the forest. These are button quails, and as determined by the Wheel of Gaia, their purpose was to reside in our forest for only 24 hours, so we could study their impact on the ecosystem. This is Cher, the female. She began to lightly peck around. The male, Sunny, was a bit freaked out and ran into the bushes, but also began to forage. You can identify Sunny by his white face and handsome coloration, while Cher was more of a drab brownish pattern. Immediately I could tell the two had different personalities, with Cher being a little more comfortable just sitting out in the open, while Sunny was definitely scared and a bit of a chicken. Cher began to explore and forage for food. Now, though these quails resemble mini chickens, button quails are from a completely different family of birds and are considered more primitive than chickens, with a different evolutionary origin. They're also tiny, about 4 inches in length. Now, button quails are found in tropical forest edges and grasslands where I live, and I felt Pandora was perfect for them. They're partly granivorous, meaning they feed on seeds and grain, but in the wild, they undergo a season where they predominantly eat insects and other creatures. I watched as Cher gazed as baby crickets stood perfectly still, hoping the dinosaur wouldn't notice them. They scuttled about as Cher pecked around the water instead. I placed a few grains of chicken feed around and watched to see if Cher would take it. She picked it up, but didn't swallow. I realized that she didn't eat everything she pecked, and rather used her beak to pick things up, inspect them, and or move things in her environment around. And then she came to a halt and stared at a plot of earth just seething in crickets. A cricket froze in its tracks. Would she go for it? Nope. Hopped away. She also ate a few small pebble grains, which is also known as grit, small abrasive particles to help with digestion. Grit helps to grind down food in the bird's gizzard into smaller particles, making it easier for the bird to absorb nutrients. I could immediately tell these creatures were unique. Cher was so dinosaur-like as she foraged around, and indeed birds are technically considered dinosaurs, as modern science has established that all birds descended from a specific group of small, meat-eating dinosaurs. In fact, fossil evidence shows that many theropod dinosaurs had feathers long before the first birds appeared. Speaking of feathers, as I watched the male grow more and more comfortable as he came out into the open to forage, I did notice that his feathers could use improvement. Having cared for different kinds of birds for years, one thing I've learned is you can tell a lot about a bird's physical and mental health by their feathers. And there was room for feather improvement for both of these quails. Eventually, after foraging the forest floor for edibles, the quails retreated into the shadows of the foliage to seek out a place to take a nap and digest in peace. Cher found a dark and private place under the tree stump, while Sunny nestled himself into a dark corner in a bed of leaf litter. I was happy the quails had settled into their new home quite nicely. But little did I know, my plans for these new quails was going to take a drastic turn. Watching from the upper driftwood was Snap, basking under the lamps. Snap is a lizard, a reptile, which means he is cold-blooded and requires heat from the sun to keep his body temperature up and have his body running properly. Cold-bloodedness is a different approach to having a body run in that the animal needs to actively move to a hot spot in order to heat up, whereas warm-blooded animals, like birds, get their body heat fueled by food. Cold-bloodedness has its pros, like the fact that they don't need to eat as much as, say, birds do. But unlike birds, if you're a cold lizard and a predator finds you, you're dead meat. It seemed Snap wasn't too afraid of the napping birds though, but she sure wasn't going to approach them to say hi. It was then that another creature that had awoken from his long nap emerged. Jay-Z, one of our resident chubby frogs, was awake early. He had officially risen from his summer-long slumber below ground and was on an important mission. He began to feed on the abundance of crickets all around, but food was not on the top of his mind. He was looking for someone in particular. This someone was nowhere in sight. Jay-Z scanned the forest floor for a visual. He eventually got distracted by a cricket and followed it. But he ended up losing it. His stomach just wasn't into hunting right now, as his heart was incomplete. He was searching for Beyonce, his female companion, who should have emerged from dormancy by now. Why hadn't she come up above ground yet? It made no sense to him, and he wandered aimlessly around the forest, hoping to find her. But these frogs are nocturnal, so he hoped tonight was the night she would finally emerge above ground. My heart began to ache for Jay-Z at the thought that perhaps Beyonce didn't make it through the dry soils of summer hibernation. She could have been eaten by ants, dried up to death, or some other fate which can happen in the wild. I didn't know it yet, but the truth about Beyonce's mysterious disappearance and failure to emerge would soon leave me speechless. Hours later, I returned to Pandora and found the birds were reunited after a nap below the driftwood. It was obvious now that they had chosen this spot under the wood to be their home base, leaving periodically to forage for food. I also noticed the birds preening, which was an awesome sign. Preening helps distribute protective oils onto all their feathers. The fact that they felt safe enough to start preening was also a sign that they were beginning to feel at home. But they were still wary about allowing me to get up close to film them, and would dash away into this spot every time I approached the tank. So I decided to arrange a Big Brother setup and used my phone to film the birds, using seeds as a lure. I stepped away from the tank and hoped this would allow me to catch them foraging our forest without having to worry about me looming about. And AC family, this is what my camera caught. At first they came out little by little, but soon were out foraging freely. I noticed them eating all kinds of things, from plant material to organic material to little insects and crickets, and even the land planarian worms. Yay! Finally a predator to eat these dreadful creatures. Watching the footage, I could see how these birds were indeed beginning to settle into life within our forest and make an impact on the ecosystem. It was heartwarming to see, but my heart was about to break into a million pieces with what I saw at night. By night, the rainforest was still. Strangely, Sunny and Cher were sleeping in separate places, with Sunny under the driftwood, and Cher on the opposite side in the leaf litter. It was the witching hour for the forest's nighttime creatures. The micro squirrels were awake and hunting down in Pandora for prey. mostly cockroaches. I spotted Dora scouring Rochella's Pass for roach morsels. The tree frogs were also out in search for insects. But one frog's nightly search had just begun, and it wasn't for food. Jay-Z had woken up and had one last spot to check for his beloved Beyoncé. Was this the night she would emerge for them to finally breed? He was determined to find out. He crawled into the watering hole. And waited there for Beyoncé to show up. He croaked and sang into the night for his love to return and fulfill their promise to breed come rainy season. But for hours, he stood there alone. It was actually nearing the end of their breeding season, and if she didn't return, the frogs would be missing their second year to breed. But Jay-Z was determined to wait as many nights as it took to be reunited with his love. What happened to Beyoncé? The answer would be revealed to me the next day, and was something I completely didn't expect. The next morning, the birds were awake, hungry and foraging together. But a certain tortoise had just completed his morning bask outside, as well as breakfast, and was placed back into the rainforest. Raphael stood completely still, not moving. The bushes above him began to rustle. As soon as Cher spotted the tortoise, she was bewildered. What on earth is that? Sonny, get over here. Clearly the birds were freaked out by the tortoise. She had a couple attempts to get close, but chickened out at the last minute. They were just too apprehensive. Birds in general are very slow to trust things, which is by design because everything is out to eat them. But speaking of Raphael, AC family, I've come to make the executive decision that at this age, he isn't suited to life in Pandora. He always just sits here and doesn't move much, and clearly does much better in a pen, exposed to outdoor light. So for now, he'll have to make a return to our rainforest when he's older and much more equipped for life in our forest. On the other hand, the birds had truly begun to enjoy life in our rainforest. And it was a bit sad to know that their 24 hours was almost up and that this was actually their final hour within Pandora. According to online sources, the minimum requirement for quails is 1 square foot of space per one quail. Pandora is 25 square feet of floor space, probably more seeing as the land is sloping, which by this measure means Pandora can house at least 25 quails. It was amazing to watch the birds performing natural foraging behaviors in a wild-type setting, as opposed to a cage at a quail farm, which is where I got them. In their final hour, I noticed how the quails were making full use of all levels of the forest. Cher really loved this hollow in the wood. They looked so happy, and for a moment, the quails seemed to revert back into wild animal mode as they scoured the forest floor like wild quails would. I even caught Cher launching for a brief moment of flight. Don't worry, she didn't hurt herself, but seemed pretty excited in her new home. Even Sunny seemed no longer afraid to wander out into the open. I watched the birds and tried to decide the best place to trap them so I could safely remove them from the tank. And the quails brought me to this corner, where they would leave me completely shocked. I realized that the birds had grown comfortable with me being around, and so I wanted to see if they would let me film them up close. And to my surprise, they did. The birds actually allowed me to get right in, to approach the tank. As they went about their business, they had officially allowed me to join the flock. In amazement, I watched as they fed on plants, insects, and other edibles in the soil. And then I witnessed the coolest behavior that truly opened my mind up to why these birds were important. Cher began to dig around with her beak as she searched for hidden things to eat below the soil. Then she began to scratch around and really make a mess of things. I realized that this was probably the most important contribution to the rainforest, as their digging would help aerate the soils, which had been waterlogged from the rains. You see, muddy, waterlogged soils can make it hard for oxygen to reach certain areas of the soil, which can create anaerobic conditions that are toxic to life. With the birds scratching around like this, oxygen could now get into deeper areas of the soil to help promote healthy soil life. It was then that I decided, you know what? Let's just leave our birds in here a while longer. They looked right at home in our forest. Over the next few days, they continued to feed on crickets, and this would not only control the cricket population, but also allow other competing prey creatures, like roaches, to reach maturity and feed other creatures in our rainforest who love them, like the micro squirrels. They also continued to feed on various critters in the soil, including, land planaria. Their poop would go on to become fertilizer for the plants. Of course, to supplement, I needed to add both seeds and grit to the forest floor as scheduled ecological events, mixing them into the leaf litter for the birds to find on their own. Over time, I also noticed an improvement in their feather quality, which was awesome to see. I also discovered the birds had been dust bathing. Here in this spot, an essential part of a quail's natural grooming behavior, where excess feather oils are absorbed by the dust particles and expelled, along with dry skin, debris, and germs. Here Cher's waiting for me to go away, so she could dust bathe in privacy. As I watched the birds enjoying their new life in Pandora, I was happy I decided to keep them in. Maybe one day they'll find a spot to nest and lay eggs. Eventually, however, I will have to move them into my aviary to join my other rescued quails and songbirds. I feel anyone who's ever owned a bird as a pet or really stopped to watch a bird can see that there's something quite regal, ancient, and dinosauric about them, like they're the evolved link to a small sect of life that once existed on Earth long ago. With as much as 18,000 species, it's amazing to think that birds have adapted to almost every place on the planet, from the most inhospitable areas of ice and oceans to the world's jungles, conquering land, water, and the skies, evolving into some of the most diverse and interesting forms, with equally diverse and intriguing lifestyles. Birds are a bit underrated in my opinion, but with these two quails, now a part of our rainforest, I'll always be reminded of how birds are one of nature's best creations. I spun the wheel of Gaia, and this is where it landed. Oh. It began to storm in our rainforest, and nothing could have prepared me for what I saw within the storm. Beyonce? There you are! Vote in my community tab to affect this story.